A star was born at UFC 256, and he has the most submission victories in UFC history. However, he has never competed for the UFC championship. Which aspect about Charles is the most difficult to accept? They are both true. Let's see whether Charles Oliveira can shatter the UFC record. Behind the scenes, Nick Glenn criticizes Charles Oliveira may appear like a little nerd, but in the Octagon, he's unmistakable. The Brazilian only reached the judge's decision 3 times in his 12-year UFC career, setting many records. He holds the organization's record for submissions, finishes, and exotic techniques.
Oh, another big knee.
He became the champion in 2021. Charles tied again after 17 UFC fights, winning slightly more than half. Oliveira battled former Bellator champion Will Brooks in April 2017. Dubrox defeated Brooks with an inside trip slam and rear naked choke for the first time in 21 professional fights. Charles replaced Iaquinta against Paul Felder. Despite having more than a month to prepare, this conflict was on short notice. Oliveira choked Paul 4 minutes in the 22nd second. Paul's mistake was stepping over there, but he won. Felder bravely survived and delivered multiple elbows to his opponent's head from above in the second round. People assumed Dubrox collapsed under pressure and was not seriously injured. Charles was attacked for his lack of power, and mass Oliveira claimed on a podcast that his team was working on physical and mental toughness. 6 months later, Charles took a 10-day notice fight against hometown favorite Clay Guida in Chicago. Oliveira was the first to be bullied. Guida to the fence, where the veteran attempted a double leg but was trapped in a guillotine and tapped. Brazil's 10th UFC submission tied Royce Gracie's 24-year record. Charles sought a 105-pound return and a slot on the Sao Paulo show in the post-fight interview. Matchmakers granted just the latter. Christos Kyogo slowly took down the guard in the second round and tightened. The Noose won his 12th bonus and set a new record for most submission wins in the Ultimate promotion on a gorgeous night in front of his home audience. Charles sobbed and pledged to make weight, but UFC management refused, forcing Oliveira to bulk up and become a real lightweight. After training Diego Lima at the Shootbox Academy, Dubrox's striking improved. The Brazilian had 3 fights in 8 months, starting with a rematch against Jim Miller, who won in 2 minutes 8 years earlier. Oliveira retaliated with a vengeance, spending 45 seconds less pressure and throwing the tips on both sides. Always a drop. It's over there, breaking the record. Bronx decided to push the action on the feet, not on purpose. These things happen with small gloves, but he got carried away after gaining his verticality and continued to press ahead, putting some strike. The 4th finish in a row earned Charles a Performance of the Night bonus. Drew Bronx was included in the top 15 lightweight fighters for the first time, ranking behind Nate Diaz and James Vick. The champion was Khabib, who still could not meet Tony in the final part of the trilogy against Nick Lentz, which catapulted Oliveira even higher. With each performance, Charles gained confidence on his feet and properly bashed links late in the first round. So right across himself. Oh wow, a leaping front kick to the face in the second lap. Everything came to a halt. Oliveira caught Nick Lentz's kick and knocked him out with a superb straight right hand.
Oliveira staying committed to the submission here.
You can see the agony on the face. That's it.
Charles Oliveira.
6 months later, when the second one occurred, the Brazilian did not pass up the opportunity to perform on his home turf. Accepting the unrated Jared Gordon nailed a one-hitter quitter in just a minute and a half on Instagram. You'll see him working on it if you give him a follow. His progress in striking game became obvious, and they're buying it right hand on the money. Gordon went Charles remained ranked 13th. His winning streak reached 6 victories, all of which were top MMA finishes.
There's the tap. Charles Oliveira by submission.
Seeker, due to the lockdown, no fans were allowed into the arena. So the headliners had to perform in silence as the host, Oliveira, occupied the center of the cage and rushed for a takedown. But Lee counterattacked and ended up on top of a single leg and began on top nicely. After the break, Charles threatened Hill with leg locks from below, and Kevin backed up to the fence and played poorly in defense. Charles is starting to mix it up, landing with right hand like Oliveira. He recovered after wrestling. In the third round, Lee dived for the leg again, and Oliveira took advantage. Kevin tapped out but pretended nothing had occurred. Fortunately, the referee wasn't convinced. Drew Bronx equaled Donald Cerrone for most UFC finishes with 7 consecutive finishes. Oliveira was second only to Anderson Silva, who had accomplished 8. The 30-year-old Brazilian became rated 7th and planned to face either Tony or Khabib, who were preparing for a dream fight in 2 months. But the pandemic broke all those plans, and Kichi beat Ferguson. Charles could have fought Benalderas in October, but the showdown fell through. Tony tried to call out Poirier or Chandler, but these options became irrelevant. Oliveira was the only one who accepted the challenge, agreeing to fight El Cucu in December 2020 with less than 3 weeks to prepare, even without a proper camp. Camp Dubrox confidently closed the distance and executed 1 takedown in each round. You knew that was never good to see. You prevented Ferguson from getting back on his feet and came next to beating the fight clock, twice on PlayStation PC and rated T by the audience. Only Tony's superhuman grit and the buzzer prevented Charles from scoring yet another submission. After UFC 257 changed the lightweight class, Dubrox retired. Poirier defeated Conor to become the top contender for the vacant belt, followed by Chandler, who had impressively gatecrashed the UFC by knocking out Dan Hooker. There were soon only 2 genuine contenders left. Poirier chose a profitable rematch with McGregor, while Gaethje was not even considered in the capacity after his title fiasco. Therefore, Oliveira and Chandler fought for the vacant gold, and the Brazilian got the championship fight after 27 performances. The fight headlined UFC 262 and became an instant classic. Dubrox scored a takedown in the first minute but got locked in a guillotine choke. Charles then found himself behind Michael's back and threatened to choke him. Michael Chandler defended and retaliated with a devastating attack motion in under 2 minutes. Michael dropped his opponent and tried to finish him off on the ground, but the Brazilian endured until the end of the round and was saved by the bell. The American made a mistake after the break and paid dearly for it. After Chandler moved off the jab early, Charlotte brought Chandler down with a beautiful left hook. Down to earth at 31 with 28 UFC fights, Oliveira's journeyman career ended with a belt. Dustin Poirier won the trilogy with Conor 2 months later and became the top contender. Poirier was a pre-UFC 269 favorite. He was immediately punished for an elbow from Charles. The fighters launched into an exchange with 25 connections for Poirier. Charles took powerful strikes from the challenger, occasionally countering with elbows. The Brazilian started the second round with a break into the clinch, where Oliveira brought Poirier to the ground and held the top position until the buzzer. Strategic for Poirier, but a major round too for Charles. Oliver was fatigued in the third lap, and Dustin became the blood diamond and an easy trophy for the Bronx residents. Charles Oliveira secured the belt. Darius never slugged it out, and fresh blood emerged in the top 15 thanks to Fisiv and Gamrot. After the first offense, the camera showed Justin Gaethje for a reason. A month earlier, the highlight had produced the fight of the year against Michael Chandler, who had earned a title shot for himself. What a fight they would have in May 2022. For the first time in UFC history, Oliveira was stripped of the title belt for missing the weight limit by half a pound. The duel resembled Charles' last Gaethje and Blue Combat. Oliveira, the black and golden champion, was knocked down twice more in the first round. Still, Gaethje did not get into grappling, instead sitting on every strike. Oh, big left from the date sheet, but quickly grew tired. Dubrox made another comeback to work on the leg kick, landing in her right hand after dropping the challenger with the ballistic right cross. He forced him to tap out officially.
He's gonna go. Oh my goodness! This dude right here, man.
Charles turned his career around with 11 consecutive wins and record-breaking exploits. 19 UFC finishes, 16 submissions, and 18 fight night bonuses. Despite his athletic success, the Bronx native remembers his roots. After defeating Tony Oliveira, Charles distributed meals on the streets of his hometown and carried home the championship belt to thousands of fans in the favelas. The Bronx represents never giving up. 6 years ago, Oliveira was forced to jump up to the heavier division and bid goodbye to his title hopes. Still, now Charles is the finest lightweight on the planet, making everyone wonder how his dream about with Khabib will turn out.